Tick, tick.
All right. Episode 145 of the Good, Bad, or Bullshit podcast begins recording in 3, 2.
Good evening, good day to you, fine listeners. Welcome to Good, Bad, or Bullshit, random topics, unrehearsed conversation, and quality reviews. My name is Mike Hodgins. I'm one of your three hosts on this podcast, along with co-host number one, Mr. Bo Schwartz. Hello, Bo.
Oh, I'm number one today. Hello, Michael. Hello, GBB listeners. And special hello to Crofton.
Oh, that was some foreshadowing to co-host number two, Mr. Crofton Steers.
Hey guys, if this was a movie, I would be and featuring Crofton Steers.
But in reality, it's more like you guys. Well, say in this case, you guys are my children, and you say, "Dad, which is your favorite?" And I say, "I love you both the same." But really, in my head, I'm like, Bo's better or Crofton's better, you know. But I would only ever say, "I love you the same." Because that's what parents do.
I'm curious about that because I only have one child. But if I had a
You don't have
second
to lie to
child,
her then.
if I had a second child, would I have a favorite? Or are what the parents saying actually true? Do they just love all their children equally and not have a favorite?
I bet you it's very clearly they love them the same, but there's one they like more. And that's a bit of a differentiation there.
I wonder.
Man,
I wonder who my mom's favorite is.
That's some heavy stuff because, everyone has a real answer to those questions that the facade of social interaction covers, right? You know there's one your mom likes the best. And my mom, too.
Yeah.
And, Mike, your mom, too.
Less choice. I think my mom likes me the best.
Less choice. Oh, yeah.
Everybody, your mom has done a good job if you think you're the one that she likes the best.
Yeah.
My brother, I wonder what he'd probably say me too.
Your mom is done as soon as you're like, I'm my parents' favorite, then you know that your parents did a good job.
I think that if I'm honest about that, I'm like they for sure love us both the same, but I gave my parents way less a hard time growing up than my brother did. So probably for that reason, it was like my brother's out drinking, getting in trouble. Sometimes it was like police, you got in a car accident at the club and stuff, and I would just be like, I'm just gonna stay in. They're probably like, yeah, I like him. He doesn't give us any problems.
But sometimes they really like the irritating ones. They really love. We're talking about love, not like personally. Like the one.
No,
they
I
really
said
love.
like. They love the same.
Yeah, I don't know.
You could be like, say your dad or whoever could be like a hellion growing up and appreciate the hellion that he has, even though he drives him nuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think my dad's equally indifferent about both of us.
It's whoever gives him the most opportunity to reno houses and buy things.
Yeah, whoever's as good at lifting stuff or helping him move things.
I was his favorite son for a little while.
Yeah, well, you worked for him.
Yeah.
Okay, this intro is off to a weird start.
Well, here, I'm curious, listeners, if you have more than one kid and you know that your kid is too young to listen to this podcast, please mail in and let us know if you like one of your kids more than the other.
We're all going, hint, Bo's mom. We know.
Yeah, you can your favorite, honestly, Bo's mom, if you want. And yeah, like just let us know, because mostly I was told, like, my mom and dad, they had 3 kids, so like everything was super even, and they were really great that way. Like, if I pulled something out of my stocking, say I pulled the Ninja Turtle out of my stocking, then the other 2 had Ninja Turtles for sure. If I pulled out a chocolate bar, they had chocolate bars. Everything is super even. There is no way of knowing which one my parents like the most. So maybe it's possible that they love and like us all equally, and maybe all parents love and like their kids equally, but somehow I'm not sure. So I'd like to hear from the listeners.
And speaking of moms and them loving their kids, I have a little side note before we get into a random topic to talk about, which was, first, I don't think my mom can write in and talk about it because I know my sister listens, but we could probably talk shit about my brother. I'm not sure if Jake, I don't think Jake listens, but Amanda, hi Amanda, hi Jonathan, if you're listening, shout out to you guys, and also hi Mom. But also a big shout out to my mom, because she's the best podcasting mother and loves our podcast the best, considering she's been a supporter on our Patreon for 10 months now. She's donated $4 a month generously for 10 months straight. This also might be her reminder that she's forgotten about this automatic payment and needs to stop it.
She's like, I need to cancel that.
But I want to take a moment to talk about Patreon. This is a free thing that we do. It'll always be free. But if you dig what we do and want to give us support, at least to pay for server costs or just to help us out, go to patreon.com/goodbadbull and become our patron, and we'll talk about you on the show, and that's kind of fun, right? You'll be a founding member of what will be a future conglomerate that I'll use as a platform to launch my candidacy for prime minister. It'll be great. I have a whole plan.
Bound to go well.
unless you don't want us to mention you, in which case we won't. Then tell us who you want us to mention, and we'll mention them instead.
Yeah, that also can't go wrong.
If you want to insult someone by implying that they listen to this show, then donate and give us their name, and then they'll be outed. Like, I don't listen to that crap. How'd my name get on there?
Well,
they were talking about me.
That's pretty funny. All right, and with that, Mike, I think we're ready to just go to Debate Town and have a debate burger with our debate family.
The machine's oiled up, ready to go.
All right, well, we're waiting for you, buddy. There we go.
Hello, crank it. Somebody crank it.
Getting the choke on here.
Is anybody getting a crank it?
What do you mean crank?
Come on. Just crank the thing that starts the machine.
It's cranked. It's going. It went. Wait, you guys didn't hear the machine get cranked?
No, not at all. Mike, crank the damn machine.
I haven't yet. That's the problem.
Okay, here we go. On. It's on its way.
The gas is off.
It's cranking. Are you guys not hearing that? Mike, it's so loud. Like, how can you not hear that? There's a ding. See? Did a random topic come out of that thing?
Yeah, let's see. There's one here.
You pulled it twice. It's almost as controversial as our veto last week.
The topic today is the United Nations.
Not to be confused.
Well, you should have
confused with the League of Nations, which was the previous iteration of the United Nations before it fell apart, and they rebuilt it better than ever.
Yeah, and when Bo becomes prime minister, he'll need to appoint a representative of this country to represent Canada at the United Nations.
I totally know who this is going to be. Like, I've already decided. This, like, I've got my cabinet in place. It's going to be you, Mike. You know it. I figure I want to put you in the most. I want to put you in the most useless place possible because you have too many good ideas for change, but they're also severe and they don't have like sexy bumping sounds and like cool slogans and stuff. No,
so did you just imply the United Nations was useless?
I think so. I think they might be useless, but only because I feel like other people told me that, and I don't really know for myself.
A lot of people like to say the United Nations is useless, and I mean to some extent. Okay, like, well, what is the United Nations? Crofton, you were starting to describe it.
Well, yeah, like it's hard to describe it without a history lesson, but essentially it is what the name implies. It's a grouping of nations of the world that get together in one uniform body to vote on international laws and to take action collectively.
Yeah, it's like the United Colors of Benetton, but it's not clothes. It's like people things.
And their advertising is more subdued.
Right.
Yeah, but I think so. Just to do a little bit of a history, I mentioned the League of Nations. So after World War I, the League of Nations was first formed to ensure that nothing horrible like World War would ever happen again.
Perfect.
And to enforce the Treaty of Versailles and all that sort of stuff to ensure that.
Well, it's funny because the Treaty of Versailles is kind of like part of the reason there was.
Yeah, exactly. So the League of Nations essentially was founded on inequality to many. For it was there to enforce war reparations and a lot of things that were it wasn't like a grouping of equals right off. Germany was sitting in a corner, and that eventually led to World War II. So after World War II, and they're like, okay, so we did this the first time after that last giant war, but really we should all sit down and ensure this shit doesn't happen again. They said a second time. And what can we learn from last time? Okay, let's, all start on an even keel and all that. So they created the United Nations. Of course, it wasn't exactly even. Different nations were on different committees. The Security Council is often tossed around as like a premier sort of committee in which, when the United Nations takes interventionist or military action, it's voted on by the members of the Security Council. So yeah, all of this to say, there hasn't been a world war since World War II. And so the longer something like this exists, with so many parties talking about so many issues, so much bureaucracy, and we've talked about bureaucracy on this show, so many different customs, so many ways of interacting, the longer it exists without war, the more sort of like the Roman Empire in many ways, the more it begins to atrophy, large, unwieldy. A lot of what you see happening to the United States right now is sort of has happened in many would point to the United Nations and saying it doesn't do anything anymore. And to them, I would often argue, well, you know what? We haven't had any world wars, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but like the Cold War existed as a Cold War partially due to the existence of the United Nations. Like, who knows? That could have broken into
I think you're overstating their importance in the Cold War. The Cold War is Soviet Union, United States. And they almost went to war several times, and it wasn't like the United Nations was like, hey guys, let's keep it cool.
No, but they were sitting down together and meeting on a regular basis throughout at the United Nations.
But like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes. But it didn't happen. None of this happened because there was a veneer of diplomacy. Had the United Nations not been there throughout that time, I would venture that it was much more likely that those situations would have inflamed into violence. Like,
it's impossible to know something like that. But yeah,
it is possible to know that there was no world war since World War II, since the creation of the United Nations.
And it's also, that's a correlation, not causation necessarily. It's true, and like I don't think anyone would say that something like the United Nations existing as a forum in which all these countries can come together and discuss world issues, it being a bad thing. Certainly, it got to be a good thing. But I think the criticisms of it being like this impotent body, and you mentioned the Security Council, and it seems like it always comes back to that, where you have these 5 permanent members of the Security Council who all have veto power, and then so you have someone like, they're like, oh, there's some war going on, we need to do this and this, and someone like Russia or China or someone's like, veto, and someone always fucking vetoes something like that. And it's been ongoing with like Syria stuff, it seems to me, where Russia has vetoed a whole bunch of things just because for some reason they just don't agree with Western intervention and installing new governments or whatever their political motivations are. The fact remains that you have people, like you're saying, to try to correct imbalance. There's a massive imbalance there because you have all these countries, and some are powerful and some are not. And the powerful ones have the power to say, we're not doing this. And that doesn't mean stuff doesn't happen. It still happens. There's still wars. Like the United Nations didn't sanction some of the Iraq wars and stuff like that. They still happened. It just means that United Nations doesn't do it. And that's just so it's like, okay, they can't stop wars from happening. They can agree to act together on something, which they seem to rarely do. And then if they don't, then countries just either make a coalition and do something, or they just do things unilaterally. So then it comes back to like, so what is it? What exactly? It just seems like the whole.
They do. I think they do a lot of things that you're not giving them credit for, because you're looking at these broad strokes, these giant things like wars and stuff, and not getting into the micro. But the United Nations.
Finish my thought. So I was going on about this.
It was a long thought.
Yeah, it was a long one.
To finish my thought was that I think it largely acts as kind of like an institution where the spirit of things is discussed, or they'll put forward, the United Nations always having a resolution on something. So they'll be like, we have so they can put an idea out into the world which has a lot of support. That doesn't mean anyone's going to do any fucking thing about it, but it will show you that a large-scale consensus exists. And I could think of something like, and that's a good thing. So, for example, the United Nations has a resolution on the rights of, like, indigenous people or something like that, which Canada has always kind of, or fairly recently, has not signed on to. And a lot of other countries in Canada's, like, colonial former colonies don't want to sign on to because of what it implies. So even though you'll have most of the countries in the world being like, yes, the rights of indigenous people are important, great, we all acknowledge this is an important United Nations resolution, and individual countries will be like, yeah, thanks, we're here, we're going to do our own thing. Because, and that happens all the time with United Nations resolutions. And so what I mean...
It happens sometimes, and those times get a lot of press, but it doesn't happen all the time.
Well, okay, my point is being that it's a body where the spirit of things are important, but they just often... So that's what I would say. It exists to, like, try to guide the world in a direction which is probably mostly good, and whether or not it always succeeds, often not, but the spirit of what it tries to do is its main thing, and often sometimes it's action, sometimes.
And I agree with that. I just think that the amount of press that its failings get greatly dwarfs the successes that it does. Like, for example, UNICEF, okay, which is the United Nations Children's Fund, right? Like, UNICEF has been raising money and working towards, like, humanitarian aid for children, and around the world for many years. They've had tons and tons of successes, and but, like, nobody, when they talk about the United Nations, people don't necessarily talk about UNICEF. They talk about, they didn't stop the Iraq War or whatever. Like, and yes, there are things that are beyond the limits. They're going to tell member states what the United Nations position is on something, but that doesn't take away the sovereignty of the member states, especially the more powerful ones, from essentially doing what they want anyway. But to your point about the veto, I think that is, and I'm not sure exactly how they manage it, but it is problematic how certain countries, namely like the big ones, and I would argue that if the United Nations need anything from the Cold War, it's sort of a revamp to be more reflective of modern times. But the big, like, Russia, China, USA, like, they have these veto powers that allow them to essentially stifle what would otherwise be unanimous decisions. It's definitely not a perfect organization, I will give you that, but I do think that it has done a lot of good that people just don't recognize because they're focused on these high level, like, international incidents that sometimes they're unable to interfere with.
But it's hard to ignore those things. And yes, there's tons of successes and tons of really nice things that the United Nations does. When the times I most think of the United Nations is UNESCO heritage sites, which are everywhere. It seems like every country's got like one every 10 miles. A UNESCO heritage site, and I was like, oh yeah, UN, going around being like, this is a cool place you should check out if you're traveling. I'm like, oh, thanks UN. It's almost like they're just like
they're also once you're a UNESCO World Heritage Site, there's sort of protections that you're
it's great, but things like that are like the spirit of things, people agreeing that, like, hey, this thing has some historical value, let's all look at it, like, great. It's just like they do a lot of things. Like, it's almost like they're an NGO, where it's like they do stuff. They don't have a lot of clout. A lot of times they're doing the right thing, and they don't get a ton of credit.
I think they do have a lot of clout.
Yeah.
Like if you look at name an international body that has more clout than the United Nations. I can't think of one.
An international body.
The World
Yeah,
Bank.
or like
I'd say probably the World. Well, isn't the World Bank? Isn't that related to?
Yeah, the World Bank is related to the United Nations.
And the IMF too, eh?
It's a specialized UN agency.
I'd be like, those arms of it specifically have a lot of power. That's true.
And they're both part of the United Nations. Like, I mean, like the United Nations. The thing is it's not perfect. No organization that comprises all nations of all cultures and whatever, and can be perfect, but it is definitely, like, I think of when Mike's talking about its overarching intentions and goals. Like, I think it would be really easy for me to disagree with some of them, because like for example, that indigenous peoples declaration of rights, like it's something that, like, I could be in disagreement with, right? But I tend to never be in disagreement with the overall position of the United Nations. It tends to be always what I think is for the overall betterment of humanity, and rarely against it, even if it's not successful, even if my own country chooses not to sign on to some of the things. Like, it feels like on an aspirational level, it's always a force, or mostly a force for good.
That's it. Aspirational. Like, that's the plane on which it most operates.
Well, it does operate on that plane, but it also operates on a concrete getting shit done plane. And
sometimes.
It's not 100%, but I think that if you looked at all the things that the United Nations tries to do, and if you broke it down by thing, and it would be very hard to do this, I think it probably gets done. 80% of it. It's just the 20% that it doesn't get done are really high profile, significant things that get a lot of attention. I also think that and I'm not sure why this is, but I find that conservative ideology often is in conflict with the goals of the United Nations, and I think that is possibly due to them being, like, if you're more conservative or you're a conservative government in a country, you're more likely to be isolationist. So
and nationalistic, right?
And devoted to your own nation's well-being as opposed to the global well-being, right? And so in which case you're going to start bad-mouthing the United Nations. And I see that all the time by these governments. They're like, oh, the United Nations is this and that. It's like they never get anything done. It's a lot. And the way it's often referred is the way that you refer to any sort of parliament or discussion thing: a lot of talk and no action, a lot of discussion and no action. And I think that like you could not have a bigger working group than the United Nations, like in terms of all the people involved. So, like, you either choose to take action or you choose to talk and take action. But if you're going to talk, then you need to talk to everybody, and that's what the United Nations is for. And yes, it's going to bog down at a certain point.
Yeah, because I would say that it would seem like the thing I hear all the time that's the criticism of it is that the world moves on and can't wait for United Nations to, like, decide shit, because it takes forever to find consensus, especially the more challenging the differences and the more stakeholders in the given thing that it does. I don't know if you guys want to continue, but, like, I have no freaking idea what the United Nations does. And you guys have done a really good job of explaining it, and I know how we frown upon doing research while doing the show, but I just did go to UN.org to just look at the broad strokes of what they self-describe as doing. And I just want to share that with the listener in case they're as lost as I am right now, because Crofton, you in particular sound very knowledgeable, and Mike, as always, has an opinion, and you're probably very knowledgeable too. But Crofton's winning. Crofton's winning the knowledge battle. Like, in the battle of impressions, like, he's winning the knowledge battle. In my mind, he's the one that, is the most knowledgeable and interested in this. Yeah. But I know that you're an informed individual, so I don't mean to slight you, Mike, just so far. So you need to step it up. But after I say my piece. So the UN says that it maintains international peace and security. So cool. That's the level I'm at, okay? promote sustainable development. So I imagine things like feeding the world as
Promote.
It's
Yes,
their
promote.
mission. It's their mission. This is their mission, not their list of. This isn't a CV. This is their mission. Okay.
Yeah.
Mission statement: protect human rights. Fail, Mike. I failed. Uphold
your human rights.
Uphold international law. Okay, presumably the law set forth by the UN.
Yeah, the U.S. violates it all the time, but go on.
And deliver humanitarian aid.
Yeah, they do that sometimes. So does the Red. Well, does the Red Cross? Are they related to the? Anyways, whatever.
I don't know.
See, the ones I'm reading, and the purposes of the United Nations here are like to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, humanitarian character.
There's a button called "What We Do," and if you just click it, it gives you.
I'm just reading their charter. To maintain international peace and
charter.
And to that end, to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination. Blah 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 blah. Mike's right. It is a lot of it is aspirational. The thing that I think that you have to look at is from the development of the United Nations has to now have we generally been moving in the right direction, the wrong direction? And I know that causality thing that he's talking about earlier, but you can't do that across the board. You have to look at a certain point and be like, look at all these things the United Nations is working towards. Have they eliminated poverty amongst all children everywhere in the world? No, they haven't done that. Obviously not. But is it better now than it's been previously? And I can't give you the answer to that across the board. I'm sure you can come up with some horrific situations, but I think generally the world is a more peaceful place than it's ever been.
Right, and it's a way more complicated thing to say that, and the UN is responsible for that. They have played some part, certainly. No one could fault them for that. But coming back to when you said, like, what other international organization has as much clout as they do, and I feel like the issue with that is that, like, most other internet, and I said they're like an NGO, and I think they are. They're like an NGO that does everything. They're like an NGO that has a branch in everything. Because I mentioned, like, Red Cross. It's like, oh, right, they do a ton of stuff all over the place in kind of one specific area. And there are all kinds of other NGOs that do all kinds of other things. And maybe they work with the UN, maybe they don't. But the UN kind of has an arm in all kinds of things. I feel like what I want to take a step back with the UN and being like, maybe why I'm being critical of it, is because it's like, it amounts, in my mind, it's like a kind of world government, right? That doesn't work. And I think that's my problem with it. It's not like I've been kind of shitting on the UN a little bit going through this. And my issue is not that I don't think there should be. Wait, listen. I see Crofton's about to cut in and be like.
Well, I just wanted it to be known that I'm laughing at your self-described comment of shitting on the UN. That is all you've been doing.
Yes. Okay, but here's where you, like, this might turn your view of my criticisms on this around, because my issue is it's not like I think the UN should go away. It's that I think the UN should have way more power than it does. That's my problem. I'm not like, oh, the UN sucks. I'm like, the problem is that people aren't in enough. Nations have not ceded enough power to the UN. That's my issue. I think the UN, first of all, shouldn't be held hostage by any one nation, which it clearly can be on specific issues. I feel like there should be a legit world government which has, like, binding... the ability to set binding law that not one country can say, well, this doesn't apply to us. This isn't. And I understand that that's a complicated thing, and really it is. But my issue is that, like, I'm like, I like the UN, I really do. I just think there should be more of it. It should have more clout. We should be moving towards something like a world government which operates more effectively rather than a kind of figurehead body which serves, like you said, as a kind of working group where people come together and say, oh, we agree, or we agree to disagree, let's move on. I wish it was something that could be like, we're setting international law, someone not complying, okay, now you have, like, major problems, and just because you're like the United States or Russia, you can't just get away with it, sort of thing.
Well, it's just because that then starts infringing on the rights of sovereignty of nations, right?
But exactly, but that's what true cooperation is, and it's already like sovereign nations already operate like that. You know, they're lowering levels of governments to some extent are beholden to the overarching one. I mean, usually federal level governments can impose their will on the territorial governments.
That's fair enough.
Within their borders. And I just think the same should apply to the world. I think we should have a world government which, and I could agree, you know, and like our country saying like some things are provincial, you know, domain, let the provinces do their thing and the feds will help out. I think there should be some domain where it's like there's world government, they decide the stuff, and individual nations kind of have to just be like, hey, look, this is international. We don't have the authority here. We govern our internal stuff. And that's all I'm saying. I'm like, there should be United Nations. It should just have actual power. Like, that's what I would want.
While I think the United Nations can be improved, I do think that like one of its current appeals, or one thing that it has done successfully, continuously, is had people running it that were genuinely peaceful people. People like Kofi Annan. People like what is it? What's the current secretary? Bai Ki-moon. I'm sure I messed up his name, but anyway, these are people that I'm comfortable running an organization like this. If you gave it a tremendous amount of power,
and Donald Trump became
leader. It would just draw certain people to it. It would get, you know, like you look at FIFA, which is like a sporting organization, and the type of people that it has because of the financial and power gain that you can have by running FIFA, and then you make like a government of the world. Like I can only imagine there's already a ton of politics in the UN. Like it would be a complicated. I'm not saying I disagree with it. It would be a complicated thing. But one thing I like about the current UN is the character of the individuals involved and the direction that it's been going in as a whole body. I think it only now thinking about it do I recognize how tremendously impressive it is that they've had these people running it, as opposed to like some sort of corrupt oil oligarch or something like that. I don't know.
But it's funny because we talked about democracy on this thing, and I always go back to the Simpsons quote where one time in this there's like, democracy just doesn't work, and that's essentially what you're kind of saying for like if we had a democratic system of UN, you'd get some leader who's beholden to all these groups or power players or whatever, and like that's
it's not the democratic element of it. It's the power element. I'm saying right now it's just not attractive. I'm sure those people could still get elected to the UN or run the UN. It's just they're just not tempted to because of the limited power that you actually have. Well, exactly. Whereas if you had total world power, I am the government of the world and I can impose laws everywhere. Donald Trump would make that huge.
But it's just interesting because like a lot of good people run NGOs, which mostly have no clout. They do good things and they say good things and they aspire towards good things. Like that's where the good people wind up in like nonprofit stuff, trying to help. Like they don't go into politics. And again, you know,
UN has, getting back to the clout, the UN has more clout than almost any. Like it doesn't have as much power as a government, a world government, but it has more clout than almost anything you can think of.
Yeah, except something like the United States.
Yeah, like the most
powerful, China.
The single most powerful country in the world has
more
clout.
Russia. It has less power than Russia does. It has less power than China does, and you could probably keep going a little bit there. I mean, I think it's tough because it's one of these things that exposes the massive power imbalances that exist in the world, which are largely wealth imbalances too. I often come back to this when we talk about random things on this show, but it's like that's what it comes down to.
Lord of the Rings, Walking Dead, wealth imbalance.
But it's just like, yeah, that's it. So like the United Nations is never going to have clout because it involves countries like countries which have a lot of power and clout sharing it. And they don't want to, and they don't have to. So they're going to be like, okay, UN, looks nice, you know, we're going to support you, do the thing, and when you step on our toes, we're going to just say, yeah, we don't really care what you say. And you see that happen all the time. And I guess, why I've been critical of it is I find it disheartening because I like the UN. I mean, you've done a good job of pointing out, you've been the positive angle on this and really like agree with everything you say. I just feel disheartened because there's all these players who are just like, yeah, we agree, except when we don't, and then fuck you. And that's it. And you can't, and you're like, and you make you want to pull your hair out, and they're like, that's the state of the world, right?
But yeah, absolutely. So your issues in the end, when talking about if something's good, bad, or bullshit, has less to do with the UN and more has to do with the people that are participating in it, the countries that are participating in it.
Well, that's what it is. The United Nations is a composition of its member states.
Well, right, yeah, there are member states. So you dislike some of the individual members, but not necessarily the organization as a whole.
They operate because they don't operate in a democratic system within their member states. It's kind of like a bunch of them have a ton of power, and a bunch, like if you're like the Maldives or something, you're like, whoa, we want to do more on climate change, and they're like, yeah, well, maybe, and then and then kind of just sort of agree to something that then they don't ratify or whatever, So it's just like, I guess it just comes back to like, I just feel disheartened by it. Like, it's a good body. Its principle, what I'm looking forward to is the next phase of something like the UN, where something has more legitimate world stage power and international clout. I hope we get to a point as a world society where we can have something like that. But I mean, it's probably a long ways off still.
Uh-oh. The UN cut off his phone. He's saying spilling too many secrets. All the secrets are out.
That'll be where I stop my little chat there. Would be a good place to do a cut, I suppose.
All right. Then let's do that while we work to get him back on the line. I'll push pause here, so no more recording. And everything's all screwed up. Man, you guys are really going at it.
Bo, you're not helping.
I'm like, I don't know enough about United Nations. Like, you guys just like, finally, like, I feel like I can bullshit my way through a lot of topics. This one's real rough.
Well, it's good. I'm ready for verdicts, and we don't. Honestly, from our conversation, Croft and I don't have
35 minutes. Yeah, let's not say we've decided to do verdicts though, because Crofton may still want to continue.
May have some, but he didn't hear the end of my statement, so it'll be very difficult to get him to respond.
I wonder if he's disconnected. Where is he?
I did notice at some point that he was freeze framed, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna wrap my thought up long.
Yeah,
and
I could hear it. Somebody's watching the Netflix. Somebody's watching the Netflix. Have you seen all those new cool Hearthstone cards? You still playing the Hearthstone?
No.
There's a new expansion coming, and if you buy one pack, or maybe if you earn it for free, but I think if you buy just one, you'll get a free legendary and other free card.
Oh, if you pay money.
Yeah. Mo, I don't know. I don't know. I could be wrong. I haven't been following it as much, but anyways,
when did it come out?
It all looks cool. Like, the Doomsayer card? Like, it's basically the corruption of the old gods is corrupting everything. So there's existing cards that are getting updated because they're corrupted. So Doomsayer is turning into Validated Doomsayer, which I find funny. It's a validated. He's like, I was right all along. I can't remember what he does.
Get rid of him?
I don't know what this. I can't remember. I've just been seeing teases and looking at little things. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. So there's a Warlock card that apparently you ditch all your Warlock cards and get a random set of cards from your opponent, and it's like 2 mana or something like that. Ridiculous.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
Have you been playing the? Well, you never play that game really, anyways.
No, I just don't have time for all of it. Like I would log in.
You say that, but you play so much fucking.
Well,
stuff.
I do a show about heroes, so I'm sort of invested there.
Yeah,
right
but you
now.
play Overwatch. You probably put in 100 hours on that.
I put in a good 2 weeks playing that game, not 2 weeks straight or anything, but no, I'm coming back to heroes just because that's where I'm making my mark.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. You know what? You do have a.
Yeah. So, and there's we had a live stream, the ladies' night. We were the man ladies doing a little live stream event last night or the night before, and did a show tonight. And I'm doing YouTube videos now. I'm vlogging or whatever. Is Crofton back?
No, I just texted him because I'm like, I don't see him.
I can't add him to this call now. Or can you call him? Because I can't add him because I think you initiated it, so it's got to be you. Oh, there we go. He's still yellow though.
He has to reboot.
Oh.
He pulled out his network adapter.
He was so passionate. It was really funny how I set him off about that. Well, anyways, we'll talk about it another time. I didn't mean to open that powder keg. It was unintentional.
I'm really enjoying the. Generally, I like the tavern brawls. I know that's not your bag because you want to win.
No, they're fun though. They're good. It's a good, healthy thing for the game. And they added more deck slots. You have 18 now, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they're gonna add deck recipes. So if you don't want to make your own decks and just want a good deck, they're doing this thing called deck recipe. I don't know what it is, but if you don't have all the cards for the good deck, they'll give you suggestions automatically and whatever. I don't know.
Didn't they already do something like that?
No, this is new. Unless it came
when you had help.
Oh no, this is way different. It's a whole other thing. Like I think it's gonna be pretty robust.
I mean, this is all coming out later, right? Though that's the thing.
This next month, I think, or something like that. Month after, like real close.
Anyways, I like Tavern Brawl, and this episode you play as Kelth. You can play as Kel'Thuzad or the Rafan, the
oh, nice.
Grand Supreme Archaeologist. So I always like those ones because it's all kinds of wacky cards and hero powers are totally different. So I've been enjoying it. Even though the first time I played as Kel'Thuzad and got my ass handed to me. I was like, man, Rafan must be better. And then I played as Rafan like 6 times in a row and got my ass handed to me every time by Kel'Thuzad. I'm like, what the fuck? Anyways, I finally won one the other day. It's just like it's way more luck driven, these things, but yeah. I've been enjoying that.
Oh no, you guys are on the wrong side of each other.
Oh no, you guys are on the same side as me.
Do we still look like?
Started a game of Hearthstone.
You guys are screwing up my.
Oh, I was about to send you a text to not start a game of Hearthstone.
What? Why would you pull out the network adapter?
It was an accident. My foot was caught on the cable.
Okay, I had finished a big rant there. There was a good place to cut, and I would have just say, let's go to verdicts, but you might have had something else to say.
Nah, even if I did, it doesn't matter. How much time are we at?
I stopped it at 35 minutes. I've actually paused it. So, considering we did an hour and 10-minute episode on Lord of the Rings last week, we're good. We're good for a more regular scheduled.
I don't mind it going shorter because also Bo has made it clear that he's like doesn't have a lot to say, and it can be frustrating to feel like you don't have an opinion on it.
You guys have carried a heavy load. I think I chimed in that once with that thing. You guys are having a good, real conversation about it, and I just don't know enough about it. I don't think. Like, but apart from saying jokey stuff, like, not on your level, we're actually talking about substantive things. If none of us knew about it, we could all just talk about Simpsons references, and it'd be fine, but I got
no, but you, it's good, like, if ever one of us feels like, oh, man, I really don't have enough to say, but the other two are doing it, I think there is substance and maturity in being like, I'm just going to sit back a little bit. I think as opposed to being like, I'm going to try and talk even though I don't really know anything about it, which is probably what I would do.
Maybe.
So, let's talk more about this.
All
Rap music, you say.
So you want me just to lead right into the verdicts then? We're good to go on verdicts?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Maybe you could say, hey, so are we ready for verdict? I don't know.
Yeah, all right. Hey, are we ready for verdicts now? Because I get this feeling like we've talked about it a lot, and you guys have your positions, and I'm probably the floppiest out of all of us in more ways than one. You mean least
informed?
Yes, that's it. Least informed. See, I didn't even know what the word for least informed was till you had to tell me about it.
Yeah, all right. Well, you want to go first then, or do you want to hear ours and then make it?
I think so, but I do have to bring in the farm animals before we can start this business. I lost them, so I'm looking for the farm animals.
We should put forth the United Nations resolution to find them. Vetoed by China. Okay, no farm animals shall be found today. Democracy doesn't work.
All right, here they are. Let's bring them in. Yeah, well, apparently, Mike and Crofton are having a hard time, hearing all the ruckus happening with farm animals. because I think they've spent too much time with their headphones, their translator headphones plugged in at the United Nations.
Hey, you're breaking the fourth wall here.
Fourth wall. No, you guys are at the United Nations getting your translation on. You get tinnitus from having that stuff in your. Anyways, I'm gonna go first with my verdict.
What? I thought you were going to listen to us.
Oh, okay. I'll listen. All right. Am I going last now?
Well, it's just like you should be.
Ill-informed.
Yeah, you should be getting the most information.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Crofton has knowledge, and I have opinion.
All right.
Okay,
All right.
look, I'm gonna go first. I don't think Mike and I are actually really that far apart. I think it's the traditional Mike and Crofton discrepancy, which is that Crofton's on the side of optimism, Mike's on the side of cynicism, whatever. I mean, in both cases, there are points to be made, and Mike is right. In many cases, like the United Nations doesn't work, or it's frustrating to get to a point that works. And can it be improved? It can be improved countless times. And yes, it is largely, in many ways, an aspirational organization, although it does concrete things that I don't think get enough attention. It has a lot of sub-organizations and committees that get a lot of things done. And sometimes those things don't get the publicity they should. So when doing a show like this, really we got three topics: good, bad, or bullshit. And I think it is difficult to say that the United Nations are bad. I think a world without the United Nations is not a better world unless you replace it with an improved version of itself. That says something right there. That says that it has worth. That says that it's something that's largely a positive force. So for me, that leaves me stuck between good and bullshit. Bullshit would maybe an easy place to land when thinking about the improvements that it needs to be, say, a more efficient body. But when talking about collaborating together on an international level, and all the frustrations that will always be associated to working together at that high level, I think it's just too cynical for me to say that's bullshit. What they're trying to do is a good thing. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but collaboration doesn't always work. But it's still worth trying to do, and it is a fruitful endeavor a lot of the time. And I hope that it improves itself. And I'm a little cynical in that regard because it's been around so long, and the longer something is around, the more it kind of grows and weeds set in and bad habits set in. But overall, at this point in time, I'm still willing to say that the United Nations are a force of good, and that they are good. United Nations are good.
Well, there you have it. That was a real good. Good pitch for the United Nations. Mike, your turn at the podium to deliver your speech.
You point out how Crofton sort of foreshadowed another possible verdict, being like, bullshit, an easy place to land.
Wait, are you talking about my verdict instead of delivering your own verdict? Is that what you're doing? Again? Why do I ever let you go after me? There's really no point.
But you're not. Anyway, I just would like to point out how you kind of touched on what type of character someone who might say bullshit might be. Perhaps my type of character. And that's actually the verdict I'm going to land on. Bullshit. I'll just get it out of the way right now.
Oh, that's a smelly cow.
Yeah, big pile of bullshit. And so I guess the reason I think I sort of stated it and perhaps I'm as Crofton pointed out, it's an easy verdict for a weak person like myself. But that's where I landed, and the reason is because I just think, frankly, like it exists too much in an aspirational sense, and it needs to go to a place where it has actual clout. I think I made that clear when I was talking earlier on. As for what it actually does, the concrete things, I would argue that those things, it should be given full credit for those, but there's all kinds of other organizations, NGOs, which easily could come in and fill the gap. It's like UNICEF, like whatever. There's all kinds of, there's like War Child, there's Save the Children. There's all kinds of NGOs that do good, like UNICEF does. It's just one among many. And the same can be said for all its other arms. There are all kinds of NGOs that does what the UN does, and then be like, in some ways, the more the merrier. It's just one of many. And where so where it purports to have clout on like these big things like war, it doesn't really. We've all seen like the veto. It does not perform its function because it can be vetoed by anyone who doesn't agree. So like on all the small things that it does, like something like UNESCO, like easily you could have an NGO that went around the world and said like, hey, these places are great. Like on all the small things that it does have small victories could easily be accomplished by civil society, international civil society organizations, and on the ones where it should have clout, it can always be vetoed because there's a massive power imbalance in it. And aspirationally, great thing. I agree with aspirations, great, but it's time to move beyond aspiring to something, and it's time to get towards actually doing something internationally. And so that's why I think in its current state, it's a great first step. Just like the League of Nations failed and had to be replaced with something better, it's time for the United Nations to be replaced with something better. It's a bullshit thing. We had to start someplace. Granted. Sorry, Crofton. I'm weak.
See, the thing is, I can't talk after your verdict, or at least if I was a civil person, but I'm going to act more like Mike and say I disagree with a lot of what Mike says, and a lot of that NGO stuff is bullshit. I disagree.
Really?
Yeah, filling this. Oh, they're just going to miraculously fill the void. Anybody can do it.
They do tons.
Anybody can
do
Anybody
NGO.
could be UNESCO. Oh, anybody could be UNICEF. That's bullshit.
We should do NGOs because there's a ton of things that NGOs do, which you well know. Anyways, Bo,
I know they do, but I know that you can't replace
smarter,
you.
Bo?
All right, do you guys hear the gavel? Wait, I have an actual gavel. There's the gavel. You guys hear that gavel? All right. Good debate, good back and forth. Good giving me a lot to think about. I still feel like a complete idiot. And I feel like I've built up what I've had to say because I've said very little throughout the show. And now I've taken in all of it. It's like the last, ejaculative conversation that's coming out at the end of the episode. And I'm really going to let everyone down with what's here. To me, the United Nations, came out of a need for maintaining order between nations. It is, to me, the grand experiment. And I feel like, faulting it for being bad is like faulting an experiment for being bad, where it's like the results are essentially benign. So probably, Mike, you have a lot of good points on the side of it being useless, but Crofton also has a lot of good points about it being awesome, because the alternative might be nothing. We just fight and whatever, or countries just deal with each other however. So there's this sense that it's an experiment, and maybe the one thing we need to look at is a way to take the results of the experiment and make it better, or do something different, like flush United Nations down the toilet and come out with United Nations Part 2, bigger and more bureaucratic, or whatever, the reckoning, the table reckoning. I don't know why table, bureaucracy. I was thinking bureau, French word for table. So all that to say that I feel like I like everything I hear in the propaganda for UN, which is that it's, for peacekeeping, for humanitarian issues, people get it done. I only know it by reputation in terms of its bureaucracy and its lack of teeth, lack of effectiveness that Mike is criticizing it for. So ultimately, I'm going to weigh my verdict down on what it's trying to accomplish, which are good things in the world. And I think it's very methodical in how it carries out its work, which is infuriating as it is probably strongly held convictions towards its, purpose, which is kind of an important thing to uphold. So I'm going to say that United Nations is good. But, Mike, you made a lot of great points, but
that's kind of where an ill-informed person would land. Someone who only heard about the United Nations today and never thought about it. It makes sense.
Wait, there's a thing called the United Nations?
I know that there's the United Nations.
It's like a world government? Sounds good.
I know it's peacekeeping
Don't look into
crap.
the details, though.
But literally every time someone starts talking about any more detail than what it does on a broad level, and I start falling asleep. I don't know why. It's just not sexy. But peace isn't sexy. But it's something worth achieving.
Peace, yeah, because we're just flowing with peace here.
All right,
25,000 war refugees we just got in this country.
Cynic, just get to the closing of business.
All right, good listeners. You surely will have an opinion on the UN unless you're like Bo and have never heard of it before. But if you have, we would like to hear from you and give us your opinion. And you can do so by emailing the show. You can send us an email goodbadbull@gmail.com. You could send us a tweet at goodbadbull if that's the way you like to communicate. You could also like us on Facebook and leave us a message there. And you can find, of course, all this information and links to Stitcher and iTunes at our website, where you can also listen to this show and past shows, goodbadbull.com. We would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to hear, more ill-informed opinions about things, Bo, where can our listeners follow you?
They can follow me at Bo Schwartz, but I want to plug a couple things first. Actually,
it's United Nations podcast.
Yeah, Bo Schwartz and the
You know what? Never mind. Just follow me at Bo Schwartz. You can find all the cool stuff that I do, including this show. There, that's where all the updates are. Go to follow me on Twitter, please, at Bo Schwartz.
And listener, if you would like to be informed in a very conventional sense, where Crofton Steers is your man, where Crofton can people follow you?
They can join my Model UN by following me at Crofton Steers. Also, they can listen to my video game podcast, the exclamation mark, and by following at, what is it, Bo? At the exclamation mark? At EXM?
Wow, it must be real good that you remember where all
at
this
EXM podcast. Whatever. It's at EXM podcast. Follow that.
EXMpodcast.com for all your EXM related information.
That's right. So join my Model UN and then listen to a video game podcast.
Is there a video game UN?
You can follow.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, you can follow my few and far between tweets at ML Hodgins. They're less cynical than I am on this show.
Hey, there was a great picture on today. He tweeted, I think, the first time this quarter, or the only time this quarter.
This quarter? Once per quarter I try to do a tweet.
So,
same as the government of Canada.
It had a picture in it of you making maple syrup. Mike's into the maple tapping there.
Yeah, it's maple time of year. I was out there. I brought some coffee grinds and made a French press coffee with hot boiling sap. Oh, man. Pre-sweetened? So good. No better way to have coffee. Crofton, you brought up Model UN. Did you do Model UN in high school?
No, man. If they would, though, I would have been totally into that.
My bro was a big Model UN guy. He even came to my university to do Super Model UN. Jake's my brother Jake. He was super into it.
So let me get this straight. Your brother was so into the Model United Nations that he went to your own university to do it, and yet you still know nothing about the United Nations?
No, because the time he spent with me was time spent either talking about shit I was doing or playing video games. It was his break. I'm his break from the hard life of Model UNing. And
what country was he?
I don't know.
You don't even know what country.
I don't remember. I'm sure he told me.
We better let you go so you can get back to video games.
No. I just, in
World of Warcraft, there's the assembly of races. It's very similar.
There's the Alliance and the Horde.
I was making fun of you. Don't put fuel on the fire.
And they meet. There aren't that many nations in the world in Azeroth.
Yes, stop already. If you had to be, how about this? Let's do it again. If you had to be Model UN, which country would you be?
Both. Canada, of course.
Lame. Crofton?
You get to pick whatever country?
Yeah.
Well, then I picked the United States.
Okay, good. I pick Russia, I guess, then.
I veto your pick.
I veto.
I veto your pick because I picked first.
Oh, dude, hang on. Wait. You know how there's a resurgence of board games in the world?
Canada, you don't get to speak. You're not on the Security Council.
Sorry, we've denied
okay, wait a second.
Mute his mic right now.
Mute him, please.
Wait a second. You know how there's a board game resurgence? Imagine our board game nights if there was a UN board game and you two were playing and I was playing.
It'd be like the real UN.
I will tell you right now, I guarantee without Googling or anything that there is a United Nations board game.
And if we played it, we would bicker, and then nothing would happen. Same as the UN.
I veto
It's
that.
very true to life.
All right.
And then we pass a non-binding resolution that we all agree the world should be a better place. And like, by the way, we're going to bomb that country because it's got oil rights we want.
I veto that non-binding resolution.
It's hard to
it
tell.
inspires something that I disagree with.
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell.
Joking. It makes it sound clearly like you do agree the UN is bullshit.
I don't agree that the UN is bullshit. Year published 1982. United Nations
Yeah.
is
A game of world domination in our time. That doesn't make sense.
World domination? Well, you shouldn't go through the UN to do that.
it's very influential.
Well,
Yeah,
the board game
anyway.
exists. I say we try and get a hold of this and play it.
No, it'd be so boring.
I don't know. It might be fun. I had a good time that episode.
Yeah, it was
pretty
funny.
fun.
It was.
I just felt Bo. I'm surprised, Bo. You just couldn't make up more opinions to have on.
I'm pretty bushed, to be honest with
I-
you. I'm
I
like
thought his closing was good.
Yeah, it was pretty
I'm
good.
pretty bushed, and this was a topic I just couldn't get it up for. Like I was like, you guys are just doing so well. I felt like every time I'd open my mouth, I'd be like 5 miles behind you, being like, "So United Nations, like, there's one in New York, right?" Like, it's just I don't know. I was sucking dust big time in that topic because you guys were speaking. You guys were arguing so passionately, and I had nothing. I had no way to stick my neck in there and make like a good point other than to derail what you guys were doing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Sometimes that can be annoying, like when you're going back and forth, and then somebody's
And then
like comes in with like, unless clearly we're beating.
That's why I sent you that picture of Leonardo DiCaprio to see if you would like want to talk about Leonardo DiCaprio. You didn't. Like you weren't like, oh my god, I forgot about Leo. Let's talk about Leo. Like it didn't even come up.
Who cares about him?
Yeah, I know. But that's what I can contribute to this thing. It would have been annoying, I think. And so I sort of kept out of it.
So, Mike, did you put this topic in? I'm assuming yes.
I am.
It was a good topic.
Oh, you mean?
No, I mean,
140.
did